Hey, Adam from Buzzy here. I've got a super fun session for you that's going to aim at giving you an overview of Buzzy. A couple of caveats. I haven't done a practice run of this. This is going to be a warts and all session, so I don't know how long it's going to go for, but I'm going to go through some important topics. I'm going to assume you've also got some background with Buzzy, but I will cover some of the basics. So our focus is how we help you build better products faster. Obviously, we're very focused on converting your Figma designs into working websites or native apps with no code. You might need code for certain hard bits, but for a lot of applications, you won't need to code absolutely at all. I'll start off with a quick demo, which is kind of, I call it my Hello World demo. We'll come back to this one and a few other scenarios. Apologies for any background noise. In the office, there's trucks and buses and who knows what's going on. And someone might walk into my office in the middle of the meeting. So this is a recipe app. It's very simple. You've got a list of recipes. You can drill down into the recipes. You can actually also interact with the content. You can put a review in. Now, this is marked up with the Buzzy plugin, and to be able to publish it, it's very, very easy. So once you've marked up your components, as an example over here, we've got a form, which is a field, which is a rich text field, and that's where you put your recipe information in. Again, you might have a form and what we call views and that. I'm going to go into some of the concepts. You also define the data. So you define the different field types, and so on. And then you go into, and we've got drink recipes, we've got food recipes, and then we've got the reviews data objects. So this is the definition of the database or the data objects or the data tables that help you do this. Now, to get this application live, and I'll just call this demo 1, I'll create a new Buzzy app. This will take the definitions that you've marked up, so the screens, the forms, the views. I'm going to explain what those are in a few minutes, and it will publish that as a new application. You can view it in a browser. It'll also work as a native app. There's other demos out there that show how that works, but this is just, again, just giving you a quick starting point. So I can drill into a recipe, and I can go down over here, and I can give it a review. So I'm going to put Yummo. I'm going to hit submit. So the point I wanted to make over here is that it's more than just a static site. There's actually a database running and a server running in the background that allows you to do things like submit forms. Again, as a Figma designer, or what we call a creator, once you've defined and marked up your application, you didn't have to worry about the server or the database, and now we've got you covered there. So again, that's just a very simple, quick overview of what Buzzy is. Now, I'm not going to go into full presentation mode, but some of the items that I wanted to cover today, which was the intro, which I just gave you, so we ticked on that. But I want to talk about screens, forms, fields, and data tables. Then I'm going to cover things like layouts, views, context, and actions, which is how you can create different ways of viewing and accessing content. We're going to talk about some of the data relationships, so things like how do you set up a one-to-many relationship, as well as more complex many-to-many relationships, and then we'll just try and wrap things up with a summary. So let's go and have a look at the screens and forms. So the first idea that I wanted to get across over here was that you can create what is simply a form, which is made up of fields. And then when you hit submit, like we did on the review in the recipe app just before, it's going to submit that into the database. Now, in the plugin, you're going to define the data table, also known as a micro app. In this example, it's called schedule to call. I'm not sure if you can see that. It might be a bit so small on the screen for you. And then when you submit it, it's going to take the fields that you've defined over here and marked up and put them in the database. So I thought I'd show you a pretty simple example of that. And one of our samples, and by the way, if you go to the Figma site at Buzzy, you can get access to all these samples. I'll actually just show you, let's have a look here in the browser. So go to Figma at Buzzy. There's a whole ton of really cool examples that are aimed at enabling you to be able to go through and learn how to use the Buzzy functionality. Some of them are very simple, some of them are more sophisticated and actual actual working examples. So when we have a look at that, where was I? So when we have a look at how do we insert this data in here, I'm going to go to the contact form example. And this is a very simple example that really gets across the idea of constructing a form, which is the schedule or call one. This over here is where you'd mark up in your, so the first, at the high level over here, you've got what's called a screen, that we call a screen in Buzzy, so that's your screen. Usually maps to the top level frame in your Figma file. And then you can start to, let me move that guy over there onto that side. So then you can start to see over here, where are we? So you can start to define things like your forms and that. So over here, that's a form. Now, a form needs to be associated with a data table or a micro app. They're the same thing. They're just different words. We're probably going to transition from one to the other, but I'll just use both interchangeably at this point in time. If I make a mistake and call it micro app, just forgive me. Same thing, it's a data table. So this is very simple application. There's only one data table, which is called schedule or call. And it takes a bunch of fields and of different types, and it's going to put them into the back-end database. So let's just have a look at that working. So I'm going to go to the Publish tab over here, and I'm just going to open up that application. This one starts at the initial form, so it's asked you to schedule a call. So I'm going to put my name over here, and I'm going to go on Adam. I haven't configured the drop-down list, but I'm going to put in a message. I'm just going to use a Latin text generator. I might put my email in and that. Again, you can put validation in these forms, but for the purposes of this, I've just kept it really simple. So now I've submitted that form. Where did it go? So if I flick back to my Buzzy plugin, the second URL that we do is we give you a look into the backend CMS. This is the content management system. This is where you don't have to go into here, but this is where basically the magic happens. So it's the server that's sitting behind the backend, and it's capturing data. So now we can have a look at that. There is that actual data. And when we generated this application, this backend CMS is generated automatically. So you didn't have to define this. It's just done straight out of the box as part of the backend Buzzy server that's running. So over here, we can see over here, I've got my name down the bottom, and then I put some things in. I didn't obviously put any validation, so I could just submit it without that. So there is the concept of a form pushing data with all its fields to the data table at the back end, and we saw that at the back end. Now, so that's great. So that's sort of a small part of the equation, hopefully very simple to understand. Now, once you're at the back end, now going, okay, well, how do I view that data? So this is where we get into things over here. We've got, let's go to the design tab over here, and we've got different. Now, one of the things you can see when you structure your Figma files, please, we've published a bunch of stuff on best practices. Figma does this. It's Figma 101 stuff. Just name everything nicely. Don't just call them frame 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. So if we look at this this structure over here, we can start to see that we've got the form results, and that's a view. Think of a view like a query. It's going and it's finding data. Let's get rid of that guy over there. Maybe I need to turn him off. Let me see if I can make that. No, I don't want to do that. Switch to photo, done. What am I doing? I'll just leave him there. I'll just keep moving him around. So in this example, what we've got is we've got a results layout. I'm going to talk about results and no results layouts in a minute. So it can either be the no results layout, which is the empty state. And it's very importantly, it's looking at data that's in the schedule called micro app, or the data table that we just deposited the data into. So it's going to go pick 5 at a time. There's no limit. You could limit it to a maximum number of items. And then you can do other things like you can sort and filter them if you wanted to do that. So if we look back at the browser over here, our contact form, if we click the view results down the bottom right, now we can see we've got that item over there, which is Adam. So, and now if I click on this item, it's actually going to take me to the detail record for Adam. So that's another really, really important concept with constructing your application in Figma, because what you're really doing is you've now got a view over here. So if I went and added another item, so I'll just put over here, I'm going to add in Bob. Again, I'll just keep this simple. This guy's really getting irritating. I'll submit that. And now if I look at my view results over here, I've now got two items in my, put them at the top there, see if it becomes less irritating. So we've got two items in my list. So we've got Bob and Adam. So that's what a view is. A view is a list of multiple rows that are stored in the back end at the data table. So that hopefully gives you an idea of what that is. And again, you configure this by marking up in your Buzzy plugin. You define this as your view, and then you can start to define things like over here. So you've got an item over here, which is going to be your repeating item. By the way, all the other ones over here that are just here for visual will be set to ignore. So you're going to ignore all those items because Buzzy doesn't need them, because it's going to dynamically generate that list of results. And then if we look at, let's have a look over here. I'll just move them over there. So if we look at this, we start to get into things like the fields. And the field over here, for example, is just a plain text field. And they map to fields that you've defined in your database or in your data table. So then this example goes through other examples of views and forms. So there is a what we call a read-only view. So that's just looking at the data. You can't have it, and then you can also go into edit. And then you can do other things that you can actually delete. So this is a great example just to learn how to do what's often called CRUD, create, read, update, and delete. So let's have a look at that working. So I can go into Bob over here. I can do this. I'm now in the view detail. Now there's a very important concept is when I click on Bob, it's actually going to pass the context down to the view form. Because when I click on Bob, I want to show Bob. And when I click Adam, I want to show Adam. So if I click on Adam over here and I want to type something in, I now need to go into the edit form. Now I can edit this. So I'll give this a name over here and I'll change this to Adam G. And I'm going to close that. And now we can see the data is updated to Adam G. So that was updated in the backend database. Now if we looked at, again, if we went back to our backend database, we can see we've got two items in here. And we can see we've got Adam, G, and Bob. So you know what's going on in the back end. So that gives you, hopefully an idea of what we were doing from a form. And then we put the fields, which capture the data, into the data table. And then we went to the views. The views were giving us different views of that content. The first one was a list of results. And the second one was the detail of that screen. Now, I wanted to get across another really, really important concept because we have what we call results views and no results views. So I thought I'd show you another quick application. Let's have a look at which one that is. I've got so many forms open over here. So here's my task list. And I'm just going to, just give me one sec. I don't know why that's so big. I'm going to delete that item. So it's a very common concept that you need to be able to deal with either no results or have many results. What do you show? So you might show in this example over here, it's very simple. If there's no results, it says no task found. You could show a form that says, hey, enter your first task. So at the moment, it doesn't do that, but in this example, it shows this. So that is an example of a no results view. Now, when I actually going, I'll just create a task 1. I'm going to set the date. I'm going to set the date to, again, you could set validation that you wouldn't allow this and that, but again, I'm just going to do this for the purpose of the example, because we've got, let's put so we're going to add that, and we're going to see a couple of things. So so if I come back to the application, let's just go back over here. It's going to ask me to come into the app. Let's have a look. And I go to the start screen. This is the same start screen that we looked at before that said no tasks. And again, it could have showed me a form to enter a task, but now it's showing me a view, which is a list of my tasks. Now, there's another important concept within Buzzy. In addition to views, we've got layouts. Now, layouts are really there to give you some options to dynamically change the way content is laid out. Now, if I go and put a task in, so I'll just call this task 2, and I'm going to put a date sometime in the future, and I'm just going to add that. Let's go here. You'll notice that there's a difference in color depending on what that task is. Now, the way that we do that is through a layout, and the layout can show and hide depending on certain criteria. We call those formula, and you can have a, let's go over here to the, let me go to the task list app. Over here we've got, I'll come back to this in a sec, so let's have a look at this. Give me 1 sec over here. I just went to, so that was the due date layout. Let's have a look at that in here. So we can go to, let's have a look at this. Now, this over here is an example of where a layout isn't just showing content, and there's obviously certain other criteria. You can make things responsive and set some min and max widths and enable flex wrapping and stuff like that. But this has got a hide formula. And this uses the Buzzy formula language, which is JSONata. It's an open source language that you can look at the data that is in a specific row and then do something about it. So in this example, it's working out if the due date's been set, if it's before the current date, then it's going, and it's not completed, then it's going to actually show you that red view. Now, if it's again, so you can set layouts to show and hide depending on the value of data, which is really useful. And the nice thing as well is that it's reactive. So again, if I went into, let's have a look over here. Where was my screen? Task list. So if I went into that task list over here, and you'll see over here, it's overdue. I could change this to another date, and you can see it automatically changes. That's what I mean by reactive. So that formula that we just had a look at, that was defined in the Figma plugin, is running dynamically based on content that is changing and it's live. So again, I could mark that as completed, and I click done, and now we see that this view doesn't show completed tasks. So we've actually got a separate view that shows the completed tasks. So sorry, all the tasks, including the completed ones, and now it shows a checkbox. So that's some example of where we've mixed the views with the layouts and used things like formulas and the view filtering criteria to show and hide content or how content is viewed based on values in there. And again, this is all live data. Again, I could mark this as completed, and I click done, and now that is appearing on the to-do list only. So now over here, we'll see that on the to-do list only. So hopefully that gives you some idea of what a layout is, the no results view, as well as, let's have a look, let's get this out of the way, as well as what we talked about in terms of the formula fields, which are can do things like show and hide based on the value of stuff. So now that obviously gives you like, there's, infinite amount of ways that you could use that in the applications that you're building. So I wanted to get onto a slightly more detailed explanation of how you can create relationships between content. And I apologize over here. This is a bug in the title. So I'm going to call this over here one to many relationships. Okay, so I want to go back to that first app that I showed you. That app was, let's have a look at it here. It's one of my windows. Oh, here it is. It's the recipe app. So if you remember, we've got this concept of a list of recipes. So now you're starting to get the idea that this is actually a view, which is listing all things of type food recipe. If I went to the drink recipes, it'll give me a list of all things drink recipe. So we can see these over here. If we wanted to look at, let's go to the recipe app. Let's have a look at the content management system that's happening behind the scene. We're going to have a look at what data is in the system. Now, by the way, one of the things that you can do with your data is that if you want to get feeds from external sources, you can actually do things like import from a CSV file, a Google Sheet, a REST API, and so on. So these are actually REST APIs that are configured to external sources, and that's how all the recipe data. Where is that? Hang on a sec. Let me the screen over here. Oh, there it is. Okay, sorry, I just hit the wrong thing. So that's where all the recipe data is coming from. It actually gets it from an external REST API. Obviously, you could store the images in here. In this example, it was getting them from an external source. So there's the drink recipes, the food recipes. Sorry, my system is going slow, and I wonder if it's because of this Loom video. Let's have a look at, I'm just going to refresh this. Just get this up again. Don't do live demos. That's kind of the thing over here. So if we looked at, again, if you remember, we made a review on that boxed breakfast before. What we'll see over here is that it's going to pull out of a second data table the reviews list. In this example, there's only one over here, which is Yamo. So that recipe only has one review on it. Which tab was that? Let me have a look. There's my recipe one. So if I went back to the food recipes, I'm going to go into the box to breakfast, scroll down. Really good. Give it another. I'll give it 4 stars. You'll see that. That's added to the database over there, and if we see that, that's now in the database. Now you'll notice that if I go to a different recipe, let's go in here, let's say the banana pancakes, there's no reviews in there. So if I was to add another review in it, and I just go my fave, and I add that in, we'll see that review that's in there just for that. So how do we do that? So typically, if you're familiar with database relationships, that's called a one-to-many relationship. So each recipe can have many reviews. So how do we set that up in the Buzzy system? So let's have a look at it. Let's go back here. So we are going to use something. So these are our two data tables. We've got food recipes and we've got reviews. You can put a rating in that, and then who it's submitted by. We're going to use something to create a relationship between the parent, which is the food recipe, and the many children, which are the reviews. And we call that an embedded app view. So let's have a look at that. Let me go back to my data definition, and I'll look at my food recipes. And we'll see over here, we've got an embedded app. Now, what that does is it just says, you know what? When you set this up, we want to relate the parent, being the recipe, with the child, which are the reviews. And it'll automatically assign a foreign key to the child that relates it to the parent. So you don't have to code that or think about that or anything. It does it automatically. And that allows you to, one, insert the data so it's related, and then two, you can then create a results view, or you can show in your form or your view a embedded app field, and it'll automatically get all the results. So it's kind of like a special version of a view that is querying the data based on the parent ID. So it's saying, I'm in the parent row, which is banana pancakes, go and find me all my reviews. Or I've changed context to the box tea breakfast, go and show me all my reviews. Now that's a really powerful capability that's available in any relational or object or data document database like MongoDB that is typically supported by creating a relationship between two data tables or collections and linking them with a foreign key to the parent, the child to a foreign key to a parent. So again, the way that you set that up within the Buzzy system is you're going to create an embedded micro app in the parent that is going to link to the child, and then that organizes the creation of content, and then when you pull the content out and so on. So that's just a really, really important, powerful way that you can create simple one-to-one relationships between your data. So the next concept is many-to-many relationships. So in this example, I'm going to show you a support ticket app. And I'm just going to go out over here. So let me just swap the view. So this is one of our samples. We haven't published this yet. There's two different modes to the sample. There's one, the sample, the end user or the customer who's submitting support tickets to the Help Center, and they get to see their tickets. And then there is a view for the administrator. So I'm going to submit a new ticket over here. So I'm going to go hi demo 21 oct. I'm going to put an issue in over here. I'm going to paste some data in. I could upload some images, put a phone number in, whatever the field is. And again, you'll define this in here. And it says, hey, thanks for your ticket. Okay, cool. So that's the customer's point of view. So now that we can see that this only shows 3 items. So that was the limit that we talked about in the view before. And this is the support ticket that we've just submitted as a customer. Now, as part of this demo, we allow you to just quickly flick to the back office, which is the company or the support team that might be processing these tickets, and they are going to be able to see that a new support. They might get a notification, a push, or an email that you can set up through a rule, but that's another demo. And we can have a look at that ticket. So I can see over here that there's a new ticket that's come in. And what I want to do is I want to assign it to an assignee. So somebody who works within the support team, and I can type a name in over here, and we can see I've just typed ahead, and I can see that. So I'm going to assign this to Mandy Moore, and so on. Now this is a many-to-many relationship. So it's a very simple one. I'm going to show you 2 different variations of that, but it's a simple one because one support ticket can only have one assignee. But an assignee, Mandy Moore, can have many support tickets. So that's kind of the, very simple. And I'm going to show you another example. We're going to talk about it, where you can assign multiple support people to one support ticket. Now, again, this concept of many-to-many is just a standard, database design pattern that most database folk will be aware of, but it's very important when you're modeling the data to understand how to put this together for the applications that you create with Buzzy. So let's have a look at this in the back end. So this is the support ticket app. And by the way, just to kind of give you just a high-level view over here, this is the user mode. So these are the user mode. So this is all about submitting support tickets, and then if we go down into the admin mode, so these are the admin screens, and obviously you can set security settings in that. Again, we're not covering that in this particular demonstration. You can set security settings so only employees or whatever can log into the back end and they authenticated and all that stuff. But for the purpose of the demo, we just kind of skipped all that. So this is the support ticketing app, and if we had a look at, let's have a look at over here. This is where was it? So this is, if you open up a ticket, this is where you get to choose the assignee. Now, again, so the data structure in this support ticket app is very, very simple, right? So you've got assignees which have a name, an email, blah blah blah. Then you've got tickets over here. So tickets are submitted by the customer or the end user. And then we've got this thing over here called the cross-app field, which links to the assignee. So let's have a look at that. So we can go and have a look that assignee. You can link cross applications. So we've got the support ticket app. That's the parent of this application or data table. Again, it's called micro app over here, but it's a data table. And then you can select the assignee, and it tells you which field name to use, and you can pull out other data if required. So this is creating a many-to-many relationship between the support ticket and the assignee. So again, you can go and create many support tickets and assign them to many assignees. So let's flick back to the demo over here. So again, let's go move that over here. I skipped one slide by mistake. So this has got two data tables that make sense. It's got another data table in that application which is to do with status and that. And that's just a standard one-to-many, very similar to the one that was done for the restaurant review app. So you can keep adding status updates, and I'll show you that in a minute. But this has got a cross-app field called assignee, which links to the assignee data table or micro app, which then has information like Bob and that. Now, obviously, the use case for this is, if you've got a massive data table of, let's say, car models or, plant types or whatever it is that might be, hundreds or thousands or even maybe millions, you don't want to put that into a standard select list. You want to be able to do one of these cross-app lookups, type ahead and go and find that data, and then you can use that in your select list. So cross-app fields can be used for that type of stuff, but they can also be used in this scenario for the support ticket app where you wanted to associate it with let's say, a user, which has then got a whole bunch of data about the user, like their phone number and email address and all that stuff. So this example, option 1, is very much about using a cross-app field to look up an assignee, and it only has one assignee to a support ticket, and then assignee can have many tickets. The second scenario, which I haven't implemented in that support ticket app, but just to give you the idea, is that this looks at option 2 for many-to-many relationships, where you've got an extra data table involved. This is sort of very similar to the way you do it with a join table in a relational database, or again in an object database, where you can have, in this example, you've got a ticket. Now, the trick over here is we're going to allow multiple assignees. So I've tried to highlight the S over here. And we're going to use an embedded app for that. So what that's going to do is going to allow you, very similar to the review, is under a ticket, add multiple assignee tickets, assign to tickets. Then in the assign to ticket, I can reference the cross app. So this allows you to create a many-to-many relationship in your applications that now allow me to assign, in this example, multiple assignees to the one support ticket. So I might have a specialist in a particular area and a specialist in another area that are all assigned to that support ticket. So the second example is a multiple assignee to one ticket. And again, the way I've done that is I've introduced this middle level data table that allows me to create many of them to be able to do that. That means I can now come in and say, hey, you know what? Give me all the support tickets assigned to Bob. And instead of looking up the tickets, you can assign these, and then you look these, and then you can get to the ticket. So there's a very important concept with context and data within applications that you define. And you can define what you want to pass when you have an action like navigate, or whether you want to pass the context to the current row. So if you remember the recipe app, we went to the detail view. We were passing the current row to the detail views. We started off with the summary view, which was a view. Let's have a look at that. It should be one of these ones over here. So this is the summary view, which is the view, and it's got a little bit of information on each one of the recipes, like the name and the image, and how long it takes and what's the level of here. But when I click this, it passes that context to this either form or view, which then dynamically pulls out that content from the data table, from the database, and renders it on the screen. Now, sometimes if you think about this, let's say we wanted to have a multi-page form. By the way, we've got some samples over here of multi-page forms. There's one over here called User Onboarding Wizard, which will take you through some examples of that. Now, let's say for a support ticket, we wanted to allow you to enter details, and it was quite complex details. And you wanted to have multiple fields, but you didn't want them all in one giant form. So you might have 5 fields on the first screen, 5 fields on the next screen, and then 10 on the one after. So you're splitting it up to make it easier for the user. You can also do branching in that based on what they've entered in one. So maybe you might have a screen that you don't have to show in that scenario. So you can do all that. The way you're going to do that is with layout. So you might have show a different button to navigate somewhere else based on where you're based on data that was entered. So that's how you would build those type of branching stuff. And then what you can do is then show different data based on the results of those views, and then pull them out dynamically and show them on the screen. Actually completely lost my train of thought there, and I apologize for that. But I just wanted to make sure that you're aware that you can create these many-to-many relationships. Oh yeah, I remember what I was talking about. So the context of, I used the example of the multi-page form where you went, let's say you started off in the parent, you went down to a child, might be a multi-page form. At the last point of that form, you do not want to stay at that child level. You want to go back to the parent. So you can pass or change the context to the parent. So you go back up to the master list. So the example of that might have been the contact form that I showed before, or the task list where you went in, you were at a detail level for a task, and then when you click submit, it went back to the parent. So again, you can use those actions past the context to render different data of either the current level, the child level, and there's another option over there of no level. So again, if you had a look at that inside the Buzzy plugin, so let's go back to the design tab over here. Let me see, I'm going straight off the fly. So if we look at here, these actions, so over here, this is where you get to define, like, at an action level, which is like a navigate or a submit or something, where do you want to go? Do you want to pass the current row to the next screen, or do you want to pass the parent row to the next screen, or no row? So again, if you were navigating back to the results view, that's really the parent. So you want to go back, you want to pass the parent view to the next screen. Otherwise, if you pass the row, it's not going to know what to do with it because the data doesn't match up. So hopefully that gives you, some idea of how you can create pretty sophisticated data layouts. I'll show you another application. Obviously, the support ticket one was pretty cool. Let's have a look over here. This is the CRM demo. This is one of our published apps. Let me just close that. Well, it's not going there. This is where I point over to the corner of them and say, hey, look there, there's a badger with a gun. Might be, I wonder if I'm disconnected. Oh, I'm disconnected from the server. Sorry about that. That is why. Oops. Let's go to the CRM demo. So just while I'm opening this one up, you can see all the different data tables that exist, or micro apps that exist at the back end. So we've got activities, we've got customers, we've got deals, tasks, and so on. If we have a look at the CRM app, this is a good example of a fairly sophisticated app that you can go in and you can create deals. You can assign them to customers or relate them to customers. So again, over here, so this is, so I can come in, I can add a new deal. Let's add a new deal. So the first thing I can do is I can either select a customer or I can add a new customer. I'm just going to call it Bob. Save the customer. Let's do that. It will take me back. So we can now see that we've got a new customer over here called Bob. And there's no deals. So now again, I could create a deal under that. That would be, for example, a good example of a one-to-many relationship. So each customer might have multiple deals that you're associating. Again, this is completely customizable by you. So this is some street. I'm going to add that to save the deal. Another example might be I've got, so if I go into that deal, I can then have do things like I can put in some activity here, so I'll just use my Latin text generator in here again. I could put a due date and so on. So again, you can create fairly sophisticated layering and relationships at multiple levels of embedded apps, cross apps, many-to-many relationships, and so on. So that's just an example. And again, you can also pull out that data. So if we looked at that, so the activity list, over here, so things like the task list in that, so you can pull out all tasks. It doesn't have to go in through the hierarchy. So again, just depending on what you can do. You can use security settings across all of that. Again, and security can go down to the field level. I'm not going to cover that in today's example, but this is, again, and you can create different views of that content. So these are just different views of the same content that might have been entered when you were entering a new deal or a new customer and so on. So you can splice and dice the information so it's easy for the users to interact with. So let's go back and see I've covered everything. So let's go back to my agenda item here. I think we're pretty much done. So just in terms of wrapping things up, so obviously, Buzzy, you can take your Figma design, turn it into a working app, responsive website or native app. We haven't covered that. There's other demos for that. Go and have a look at them. We've talked about the basics of screens, forms, fields, and data tables. That's really getting stuff from the user into the database. And then we've talked about things like layouts, views, and passing context and actions, ways of navigating around that data. Now, the simple example of the contact list was very simple. You entered contact 1, 2, 3, 4, similar to the task app and that. But when we started to look at other more complex examples like the CRM app or the support ticket app, then you start to see things like one-to-many relationships and many-to-many relationships in the way that you can relate data and how the forms, layouts, and views can pull that data out and obviously using Figma make it look absolutely awesome. So hopefully that gives you some basic understanding of what's in Buzzy. Again, this has been a one-take demo. I put the slides together. I've just run with it. Apologies for the little glitches here and there. Reach out to us. We're going to be working on more content. We want to make it easier for you to create these types of applications. And hopefully you don't need a lot of technical depth to get right into the nitty-gritty because, again, we've handled that all for you. thanks again for watching. Reach out to us on our Discord and want to see what cool stuff you're creating with Figma and Buzzy. Thanks.